Every year, as we are working our way through the weather unit in my earth science class, inevitably a student will speak up and say, meteorologists are only right like 50% of the time, anyone could do their job. Now, most of the time, I say meteorologists do a better job than most people give them credit for, and that creating a forecast is actually more difficult than it seems, and then we move on. This year, when that moment came, instead of brushing off the comment, I decided to put the students to the test. I set out to create scenarios in which the students would interpret data shown on weather maps, and then they would have to forecast the weather for a few days for a given location. Using constructivist methods, I started the kids off with just the basics. We had previously learned what different weather symbols mean on weather maps, as well as some basics on wind and weather patterns. I showed them on a simple weather map how I could predict the weather for our town, Garrett, Indiana, based on the approaching fronts and pressure systems. I then showed them that I could determine relative temperatures by looking at wind patterns. We worked through a couple examples as a class, and then the students were turned loose to work on making their own forecasts with their lab partners using laptops. The students were given a map to look up online and had to draw in the location of weather systems for the next day on blank maps they had been given. As the students worked, they could ask one another questions if they were stuck, and the forecasting scenarios got progressively harder until they were dealing with some pretty complex weather systems. As the weather systems got harder, they also had to project farther into the future, and the students began to grumble that it was nearly impossible to tell what the weather was going to be like 5 to 7 days from now. It was very satisfying to walk around the room and see the students engrossed in their work and working closely with their partners to extrapolate the forecasts. Another instructional strategy in use here is computer-supported collaborative learning. This strategy, grounded in social constructivism, gives students opportunities to practice 21st century skills in communication and critical thinking with the use of relevant technologies found in the workplace. After the students were finished, I asked the class if they still thought it was easy to make a weather forecast. It was clear from their response that the activity had opened their eyes. Whereas in the past, I would usually have students look at a map and tell me which states were experiencing a cold front or low pressure system, now the students were analyzing maps and telling me not only what sorts of weather systems could be seen, but also where they were located and where they would be moving in the future. At the conclusion of the lesson, my own personal forecast was that the next time the students watch the weather on the news, they will not only be able to follow along and understand better what is going on, but they will also have a newfound respect for the men and women that make these forecasts.